I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror of the five-star hotel, adjusting the designer blazer that still felt foreign on my shoulders. In 20 minutes, I would be accepting the National Innovation Award while my parents watched from the audience, the same parents who once told me I'd never amount to anything. The invitation to them had been an impulse, a moment of weakness or perhaps strength. After 5 years of silence between us, they were about to witness firsthand how spectacularly wrong they had been about their disappointing daughter. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The day everything changed began like any other Thursday in the Morgan household. I was hunched over my laptop at the kitchen table, surrounded by circuit boards, microcontrollers, and pages of scribbled code. My latest project, a low-cost medical monitoring system, was finally showing promise after 18 months of trial and error. Elena, can you please move all this junk somewhere else? Cassandra and Mom are coming over for dinner. My father said, gesturing dismissively at my work as he placed grocery bags on the counter. I bit back a sharp response. At 26 years old, I was still living in my childhood home, not by choice but by financial necessity. My engineering startup consumed every penny I earned from my part-time IT job, leaving nothing for rent elsewhere in expensive Westlake. Sure, Dad. Give me 10 minutes to document where I left off, I replied, typing furiously to save my progress. He sighed heavily, the sound I'd grown accustomed to since childhood, the sound of Robert Morgan's disappointment in his younger daughter. Your sister is bringing her promotion letter to show us. Senior Marketing Director at Crestview Pharmaceuticals. At only 28. Can you believe it? I could, actually. Cassandra had always been the golden child, her path illuminated by our parents' approval and financial support. Her college tuition paid in full, her first car a graduation gift, her down payment on a condo borrowed from our parents without any expectation of repayment. Meanwhile, I'd worked nights to pay for my engineering degree, graduated with honors that no one attended, and received a blender as my only gift. The doorbell rang precisely at 6. My mother entered first, elegant as always in her cashmere, sweater and pearls, followed by Cassandra, my sister, my opposite, my lifelong reminder of what the Morgan family valued. Elena, you look tired, my mother said, offering her cheek for a kiss instead of a proper hug. Still playing with your electronics, I see. It's not playing, Mom. It's product development for my startup, I corrected, forcing a smile. Oh, honey, you're still doing that? Cassandra interjected, setting an expensive bottle of wine on the table. I thought you would have moved on to something more stable by now. Like marketing overpriced pharmaceuticals? The words escaped before I could stop them. Elena. My father's voice carried the warning I'd heard throughout my life. Cassandra laughed, the sound practiced and perfect, like everything else about her. It's fine, Dad. Elena's just jealous. Not everyone can handle the corporate world. Dinner proceeded as it always did. Cassandra dominated the conversation with tales of her corporate triumphs, client dinners, and office politics masterfully navigated. My parents hung on every word, offering praise and asking questions that allowed her to further showcase her accomplishments. I haven't even told you the best news, Cassandra announced as my father served coffee and the chocolate torte my mother had brought, Cassandra's favorite dessert. Crestview is sending me to their leadership summit in Zurich next month. All expenses paid, plus a shopping allowance for appropriate executive attire. My mother clapped her hands together. Oh, Cassie, international travel now. We're so proud of you. That's my girl, my father beamed, always reaching higher. I stared at my untouched dessert, invisible as usual. My latest breakthrough with the cardiac monitoring system, solving a problem that had stumped me for months, suddenly seemed small and insignificant in this room. What about you, Elena? Cassandra turned to me with that smile that never quite reached her eyes. Any progress with your hobby? It's not a hobby, I said quietly. I've developed a monitoring system that could revolutionize cardiac care in rural and underserved communities. The prototype is working, and I'm meeting with potential investors next week. The silence that followed was familiar, the uncomfortable pause that always came when I dared to mention my ambitions. My father cleared his throat. Investors? Elena, be realistic. You've been tinkering with these gadgets since high school, and what has it gotten you? No stable job, no savings, still living at home at 26. Robert, my mother placed a manicured hand on his arm. Be kind. Not everyone can be as driven as Cassandra. I am driven, I insisted, feeling the familiar heat rising in my cheeks. My work could save lives in communities that can't afford current monitoring technology. Noble, Cassandra said with practiced sympathy. But, is it practical? When I was your age, I was already 2 promotions into my career path. When you were my age, you'd also received over $100,000 in family support, I replied, the bitterness I usually suppressed breaking through. Imagine what I could accomplish with that kind of advantage. My father's expression darkened. We invested in Cassandra because she had a plan, ambition, direction. She's always known what she wanted and worked for it systematically. And I haven't? The question hung in the air. My mother sighed, exchanging glances with my father. Elena, we've been meaning to talk to you about your situation. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. I'd heard this prelude before, always preceding some new comparison, some new way I didn't measure up to the Cassandra standard. Your father and I think it's time for some changes, she continued. You're 26 now. We've been patient with this startup fantasy of yours, but it's clearly not materializing into anything substantial. My prototype is working, I repeated, stronger this time. The investor meeting will likely lead nowhere, my father interrupted. Just like the last 3 promising leads you've mentioned over the years. It's time for a reality check. Cassandra nodded in solemn agreement. They're right, Elena. Not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur. There's no shame in admitting that and finding a regular job. The patronizing tone, the practiced concern, it was all too familiar. I'd spent my life being patted on the head and told to lower my ambitions to something more realistic. We've come to a decision, my father continued, his tone final. You have 3 months to either find a proper job with benefits and career, potential, or start paying rent here, market rate. It's time you learned financial responsibility. I stared at him in disbelief. Market rate rent would be nearly $2,000 in this neighborhood. You know I can't afford that while developing my product. Exactly. My mother nodded as if I'd made their point for them. This deadline will motivate you to focus on practical career options instead of these experiments. Meanwhile, my father added, we've decided to help Cassandra with her executive wardrobe for the Zurich trip, an investment in her future advancement. I set my fork down carefully, afraid I might otherwise throw it. Let me understand. You're giving Cassandra, who makes 6 figures and just got promoted, money for clothes, while threatening to charge me market rate rent when you know it would bankrupt me and kill my startup? That's a very immature way of looking at it, my mother replied. We're trying to help both our daughters succeed in ways appropriate to their capabilities. The implication was crystal clear. They believed Cassandra capable of greatness, while I was a disappointment they needed to redirect toward mediocrity. Cassandra has proven her financial acumen, my father added. She'll pay us back eventually, though we've told her there's no rush. I looked at my sister, who had the decency to at least appear slightly uncomfortable. Have you ever paid back any of the loans they've given you over the years? The tuition, the car, the condo down payment? Cassandra's perfect smile faltered. My success is their return on investment. Not everyone can turn parental support into achievement, Elena. Something broke inside me then, a dam holding back years of hurt, resentment, and silent rage at being the family's eternal disappointment. I stood up so abruptly, my chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You've never believed in me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Not when I won the state science fair in high school, not when I graduated with honors in electrical engineering, while working 30 hours a week. Not when my first patent was approved last year, which none of you even acknowledged." "Elena, sit down," my father ordered. "This emotional display only proves our point about your maturity level." "No," I replied, gathering my laptop and notes. "I'm done sitting quietly while you worship Cassandra and dismiss everything I do. You want me out? Fine. I'll be gone by morning." My mother looked alarmed, not at the prospect of losing me, but at the disruption to their carefully orchestrated family dynamic. "Don't be dramatic. We're not asking you to leave immediately." I'm not being dramatic. I'm finally seeing clearly. I turned to Cassandra. "Congratulations on your promotion, Cass. Truly. But someday you might realize there's more to life than corporate ladder climbing and parental approval." With that, I walked out of the dining room, ignoring their calls to come back and discuss this rationally. In my bedroom, I pulled out the duffel bag that had accompanied me to college and began packing essentials. My hands trembled, but my mind was, suddenly, startlingly clear. For 26 years, I had tried to earn my place in a family that had decided long ago that I was the lesser daughter. I had achieved remarkable things despite their lack of support, not because of any advantages they provided. And I had allowed their dismissal of my work to make me doubt myself. No more. I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door. My mother entered without waiting for a response, another small reminder that my space, my boundaries, had never been respected in this house. "Elena, you're overreacting," she said, watching me pack with an expression of exasperation rather than concern. "Your father and I are simply trying to help you find your appropriate path. By threatening homelessness if I don't abandon my dream? That's not help, Mom. That's control." "Dream?" She sighed heavily. "Elena, at some point dreams must give way to reality. Not everyone can be exceptional. There's nothing wrong with finding a stable, respectable job and accepting your limitations." I paused, a stack of technical journals in my hands. "Do you even hear yourself? You've never once suggested that Cassandra accept limitations or lower her ambitions. Cassandra is different. She's always had that special drive, that clarity, of purpose." "So have I interrupted, my voice breaking despite my determination to remain composed. "My purpose has always been clear. I want to create technology that helps people who can't access or afford current medical systems. I have patents, prototypes, and potential investors. What I've never had is your belief in me." My mother crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "If your ideas were truly viable, you'd have succeeded by now." In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the futility of trying to make her understand. My parents had decided years ago which daughter was destined for greatness and which was meant for mediocrity. No achievement of mine would ever change that perception. "I'll be gone in an hour," I said quietly. "Please tell Dad not to wait up." As she left, closing the door with a soft click that seemed to echo with finality, I sat on my childhood bed one last time. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend, Marlene. "How was family dinner from hell? Still on for coffee tomorrow?" I texted back, "Need a bigger favor than coffee. Any chance your couch is available for a temporary roommate?" Her response was immediate. "Doors unlocked. Wine is open. Explanation can wait until you get here." I finished packing, taking only what I truly needed. Clothes, my laptop, external hard drives with all my research and designs, and the prototype medical monitor I'd poured my soul into creating. The rest, childhood mementos, books, the life I'd lived in this house, could wait. As I carried my bags down the stairs, I found my father alone in the living room, Cassandra and my mother having apparently retreated to the kitchen. "This is childish, Elena," he said, not looking up from his newspaper. "Running away won't solve your professional shortcomings." "I'm not running away," I replied. "I'm moving forward, without the constant reminder that you think I'm not good enough." He finally met my gaze, and for a moment I thought I glimpsed something like regret in his eyes. But his words dispelled that illusion. "When you're ready to be realistic about your future, you know where to find us." I nodded, suddenly too tired for anger. "Yes, I do. Goodbye, Dad." As I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, the weight that had pressed on my chest for years began to lift. Tomorrow would bring 1,000 challenges: finding permanent housing, stretching my meager savings, preparing for the investor meeting that might make or break my company. But for the first time, I was free from the constant comparison, the subtle undermining, the pervasive message that I should aspire to less because I was somehow less. Tonight I had lost a family, but as I turned onto the highway toward Marlene's apartment, I felt like I might finally find myself. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marlene's apartment was everything my parents' house wasn't: small, cluttered, and wonderfully alive. Posters of female scientists and engineers covered the walls, dirty coffee mugs gathered on every surface, and a whiteboard dominated one wall, covered in the complex algorithms from her work as a data scientist. "So they finally did it," she said, pouring me a generous glass of wine as I finished recounting the evening's events. "They finally pushed you to the breaking point." I curled into the corner of her worn sofa, exhaustion settling into my bones. "I should have left years ago." "Maybe," Marlene agreed, tucking her legs beneath her. "But you're here now. Question is, what's your next move?" That was Marlene, always forward-looking, always practical. We'd met in college, 2 scholarship students surrounded by peers whose parents paid their tuition without a second thought. We'd bonded over ramen dinners and late-night study sessions, understanding each other's hunger for success in a way our more privileged classmates couldn't comprehend. "I need to find an apartment, obviously," I said, sipping the wine. "Somewhere cheap enough that I can still finance the prototype development." "And your investor meeting is Tuesday, 4 days from now." Marlene leaned forward, her dark eyes intense. "Then that's your priority. Not apartment hunting, not processing family drama. You've been working toward this meeting for months. Everything else can wait." She was right, of course. Cortex Ventures was the first venture capital firm that had shown genuine interest in my cardiac monitoring system. Their focus on healthcare technology made them the perfect potential partner. If I could secure their investment, everything would change. "You can stay here as long as you need," Marlene continued. "But Elena..." She waited until I met her gaze. "This time, you need to go into that meeting believing in yourself the way I believe in you, the way your parents never have." I nodded, throat tight with sudden emotion. "I know." "Do you?" She tilted her head, studying me. "Because for as long as I've known you, you've been designing breakthrough technology, while apologizing for taking up space. You've been changing the world while believing somewhere deep down that your parents were right about you." Her words struck a nerve. Despite my academic achievements, despite my patents and prototypes, I had never fully shed the identity of the disappointing daughter. I'd carried their judgment with me, allowing it to color how I presented myself and my work. "Not anymore," I said, the conviction in my voice surprising even me. "I'm done trying to prove myself to people who've already decided I'm not worth believing in." Marlene raised her glass. "Now that's something I'll drink to." The next morning, I woke at dawn on Marlene's lumpy sofa bed, my mind unexpectedly clear. While she slept, I set up a makeshift workstation at her kitchen table and immersed myself in preparation for the investor meeting. I refined my presentation, updated the financial projections, and ran diagnostics on the prototype to ensure everything was functioning perfectly. By the time Marlene emerged, bleary-eyed and reaching for coffee, I had already been working for hours. "You look different," she observed, studying me over the rim of her mug. "Different how?" "I don't know. Focused, present, like you've shed something heavy." She was right. The constant background noise of trying to earn my parents' approval had finally gone silent. In its place was a clarity I hadn't experienced before, a singular focus on my work and its potential impact. "I feel different," I admitted, "like I've been running a race with weights on my ankles and someone finally removed them." Over the weekend, I continued refining my pitch while Marlene helped me search online for affordable apartments. The options in Westlake were depressingly limited, either wildly expensive or questionably habitable. "What about Riverton?" Marlene suggested, scrolling through listings. "It's not as trendy, but the commute isn't terrible, and prices are about 40% lower." Riverton was the neighboring city, more industrial and considerably less affluent than Westlake. It was also where many of the manufacturing plants that had once been the region's economic backbone now stood abandoned, including the old Merrick Medical Supply Factory where my grandfather had worked for 30 years. "Actually," I said slowly, an idea forming, "Riverton might be perfect." Monday morning, I took a detour on my way to pick up more clothes from my parents' house. I found myself driving through Riverton's industrial district, past the shuttered factories and warehouses that had once employed thousands. The Merrick building stood among them, its red brick facade still imposing despite the broken windows and faded signage. I parked across the street, memories washing over me. My grandfather had brought me here once when I was 10, proudly showing me the assembly line where he'd worked his way up from line worker to floor supervisor. "People think manufacturing is just about making things," he'd told me. "But it's really about solving problems, finding a better way every single day." Grandpa Thomas had been the first person to put tools in my hands, to teach me that understanding how things worked was the first step to improving them. He'd died when I was 15, leaving me his collection of technical manuals and a letter that my mother had dismissed as sentimental nonsense, but that I'd treasured. "Elena, you have the mind of an inventor and the heart of a humanitarian. The world needs both." On impulse, I called the number on the faded "for lease" sign hanging from the building's facade. To my surprise, someone answered on the second ring. Marshall Property Management. "Hi, I'm calling about the old Merrick building in Riverton," I said, watching a pigeon roost in one of the broken windows. "Is it still available?" The woman on the phone chuckled. "That old place? Been vacant for nearly a decade? What exactly are you looking for?" "Space," I replied. "Affordable space where I could live and work on developing medical technology." There was a pause. "Well, it's zoned for industrial use, but there's an office section that could be converted to living quarters. It needs work, though. A lot of work. Not exactly move-in ready. Could I see it today?" 2 hours later, I stood in what had once been the administrative offices of Merrick Medical Supply, following a bemused property manager through dust-covered rooms with peeling paint and exposed wiring. "Plumbing works," she said, flipping light switch that illuminated nothing. "Electricity needs updating. No heating or cooling to speak of. Like I said, it needs work." But I wasn't seeing the problems. I was seeing possibilities. The main office could become living quarters. The conference room, with its long table still eerily in place, would make a perfect lab. The small kitchenette could be functional with minimal updates, and the rent, a fraction of what a proper apartment would cost in Westlake. "I'll take it," I said. The property manager blinked. You haven't even asked about terms or… What are they? She named a figure that made my heart leap, less than half what my parents had threatened to charge me for my childhood bedroom. 6-month minimum lease, first and last month's deposit. But seriously, you'd need to sign waivers acknowledging. The condition, and even then, I'll sign whatever you need. When can I move in? She studied me with newfound interest. You're really serious, aren't you? What exactly are you developing? A cardiac monitoring system for underserved communities, I replied. More affordable, more durable, and more user-friendly than anything currently on the market. Something shifted in her expression. Medical technology? Like what Merrick used to make before they outsourced everything? I nodded. My grandfather worked here for 30 years. She extended her hand. Janet Marshall. My father owned the tool and die shop that supplied Merrick with custom parts. Small world. As we shook hands, I felt an unexpected connection to this building, to this city with its shuttered factories and resilient spirit, to my grandfather's legacy. This wasn't just about finding affordable space. It was about returning to roots I hadn't fully appreciated. If you're really bringing medical manufacturing back to this building, even on a small scale, Janet said, I might be able to offer some flexibility on the deposit. By noon, I had signed a 6-month lease on what most people would consider an uninhabitable industrial shell. By 2 o'clock, I had retrieved my remaining belongings from my parents' house, thankfully while they were both at work, leaving my key and a brief note. I've moved out as requested. Please forward any mail to my email address. And by 7 that evening, I was sitting cross-legged on a sleeping bag in my new home laboratory, surrounded by boxes and dust, putting the finishing touches on my investor presentation while Marlene installed security bars on the ground floor windows. This place is either brilliantly strategic or completely insane, she remarked, stepping back to admire her handiwork. I haven't decided which. It's perfect, I insisted. Low overhead means I can stretch my savings further, and look at all this space. Marlene surveyed the cavernous former conference room where I'd set up my equipment. It does have a certain mad scientist charm. Speaking of which, she handed me a small package wrapped in newspaper, housewarming gift. Inside was a small brass plaque that read, Dr. Elena Morgan, Morgan Medical Technologies. You had this made? I asked, running my fingers over the engraved letters. Been holding on to it for a while, Marlene admitted. Waiting for you to finally start your own company instead of just talking about it. Seems like the right time. I blinked back unexpected tears. I don't even have a registered business yet. Details, she waved dismissively. The point is, you're finally claiming your space, literally and figuratively. Your parents never gave you the recognition you deserved, so it's time you gave it to yourself. That night, after Marlene left, I lay in my sleeping bag looking up at the water-stained ceiling of what had once been my grandfather's workplace. The building creaked and settled around me, its industrial bones shifting in the night air. It should have felt lonely or even frightening, this empty factory with its echoing halls and broken windows. Instead, it felt like possibility, like potential, like home. My phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. Mom and Dad told me what happened. Don't you think you're overreacting? Call them. I didn't respond. Instead, I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and closed my eyes, mentally rehearsing my presentation one more time. Tomorrow, I would walk into Cortex Ventures not as Elena Morgan, the disappointing daughter, but as Elena Morgan, founder and CEO of Morgan Medical Technologies. For the first time in my life, I was writing my own story, free from the narrative my family had assigned me. And despite the dust, the exposed wiring, and the uncertain future, I fell asleep with a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I was exactly where I needed to be. The Cortex Ventures office occupied the top floor of the sleekest building in Westlake's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, including, I noticed with irony, the exclusive neighborhood where my parents lived. As the receptionist led me through the glass-walled corridor to the conference room, I felt strangely calm. Yesterday, I might have been intimidated by the obvious wealth and power concentrated in this space. Today, I saw it simply as a potential resource for bringing my vision to life. The conference room held 4 people: Sarah Chen, Cortex's founding partner; Marcus Daniels, their healthcare technology specialist; a younger man introduced as their financial analyst; and an older gentleman who remained silent during introductions. "Elena Morgan," Sarah said, shaking my hand firmly. "We've been looking forward to this presentation. Your preliminary materials were intriguing." I set up my laptop and placed my prototype on the table. A sleek device roughly the size of a smartphone that contained technology capable of monitoring cardiac functions with precision that matched hospital-grade equipment at a fraction of the cost. "Thank you for meeting with me," I began, my voice steady. "What I'm about to show you isn't just another medical device, it's a democratization of healthcare technology that could change outcomes for millions of people in underserved communities." For the next 20 minutes, I outlined my vision: a cardiac monitoring system designed specifically for deployment in rural clinics, developing countries, and urban centers with limited healthcare access. I explained the proprietary technology that made it more durable, more user-friendly, and, most importantly, significantly more affordable than existing solutions. Current cardiac monitoring systems cost between $20,000 and $40,000, I explained. They require specialized training to operate and interpret, stable power sources, and regular maintenance. My system costs under $2,000 to produce, runs on rechargeable batteries that last up to 72 hours, and includes AI-assisted interpretation that allows healthcare workers with minimal training to identify critical issues. Marcus leaned forward. "Ambitious claims. What's your evidence?" This was the moment I'd prepared for. I demonstrated the prototype, showing real-time cardiac monitoring using my own heartbeat. I presented test results comparing its accuracy to hospital systems costing 20 times as much. I outlined the proprietary algorithms that made interpretation accessible to users without specialized training. The silent man finally spoke. "You developed all of this yourself?" "Yes," I replied. "From concept to functional prototype. Without institutional backing or research grants." "That's correct. I've financed development through personal savings and income from my IT consulting work." He exchanged glances with Sarah. Something shifted in the room. A new energy, a sharpened focus. "What's your manufacturing plan?" Sarah asked. "Theoretical technology is one thing. Mass production is another challenge entirely." "I've secured space in a former medical supply factory in Riverton," I answered. "The facility already has much of the necessary infrastructure. Initial production would be limited to fulfill orders for clinical trials, with scaling capabilities as demand increases." "Riverton?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's an unexpected location." "It's strategic," I countered. "Lower overhead means more resources directed to product development. Additionally, the area has skilled labor from its manufacturing history that's currently underemployed." For another 40 minutes, they questioned every aspect of my business plan: market analysis, regulatory pathway, intellectual property protection, scaling strategy. I answered each question directly, acknowledging limitations where they existed, while emphasizing the solid foundation I'd built. Finally, Sarah closed her portfolio. "Impressive presentation, Ms. Morgan. We'll need to discuss internally and conduct due diligence, but I believe there's potential here worth exploring further." "Before you go," the older man said, speaking for only the second time, "I have one question. Why this project? What drives you personally? The question caught me off guard. I'd prepared for technical inquiries, financial projections, market analyses, not a probe into my personal motivation. For a moment, I considered giving a standard answer about improving healthcare access. Instead, I chose honesty. My grandfather died of a heart attack in a rural clinic 20 minutes from a hospital that could have saved him. The clinic had basic equipment, but nothing that could properly diagnose his condition in time. The doctor there literally used a stethoscope and his best judgment. I paused, the memory still painful after all these years. He was the first person who believed in my ability to build things that matter. This technology won't bring him back, but it might prevent others from experiencing similar losses. The older man nodded slowly. Thank you for your candor, Ms. Morgan. We'll be in touch within the week. Outside the building, I exhaled deeply, the tension of the past few days finally catching up with me. The meeting had gone well, better than I'd dared hope. Whether it led to investment or not, I had represented my work with confidence and clarity I hadn't known I possessed. My phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. Battle report requested, Commander. I smiled and texted back, mission accomplished, awaiting further orders. Her response came immediately. Excellent. New orders, celebrate. Meet me at Vito's at 7. Vito's was a dive bar near Marlene's apartment where we'd occasionally splurged on happy hour appetizers during our cash-strapped college days. It seemed fitting to mark this milestone there, regardless of Cortex's ultimate decision. I spent the afternoon transporting more of my equipment to the factory, setting up my workspace with renewed purpose. Every time doubts crept in. What if Cortex declined? What if the prototype failed in wider testing? What if my parents were right all along? I pushed them away with deliberate focus on the next immediate task. Unpack this box, connect these wires, calibrate this sensor. B. The time I arrived at Vito's that evening, I was physically exhausted but mentally exhilarated. Marlene was already waiting, a pitcher of beer and a loaded plate of nachos on the table between her and, to my surprise, Janet Marshall, the property manager from the factory. Hope you don't mind, Marlene said, pouring me a beer. I swung by the factory to drop off that power strip you needed, and Janet was there checking the electrical panel. We got talking, and it turns out she's actually quite interested in your project. Janet raised her glass. My father would have loved the idea of that building being used for medical technology again. Plus, Marlene tells me you crushed your investor meeting today. We don't know that yet, I cautioned, taking a seat. They said they'd be in touch within the week. They will be, Marlene said confidently. And in the meantime, Janet has some interesting news. Janet leaned forward. I've been reaching out to some of the old Merrick employees, the ones still in the area. Several of them are intrigued by your project, including Thomas Reeves, who was their lead mechanical engineer before the plant closed. My heart jumped. Thomas Reeves, my grandfather mentioned him. He designed specialized assembly equipment for their cardiac monitors. That's him, Janet nodded. He's retired now, but still tinkers in his garage workshop. Said he'd be interested in consulting if you ever needed specialized manufacturing solutions. The implications were enormous. Access to someone with direct experience in medical device manufacturing could save months of trial and error, not to mention providing valuable insights for regulatory compliance. That would be incredible, I admitted, though I can't afford much in consulting fees at the moment. Janet waved dismissively. Tom's not interested in money. He's bored in retirement and excited about the possibility of his expertise being useful again. Plus, she hesitated, I think many of these folks feel like the work they devoted their lives to was discarded when Merrick outsourced everything. Helping a new generation bring medical manufacturing back to Riverton? That's worth more than consultant fees to them. Our conversation continued, with Janet offering connections to other former Merrick employees, electricians, quality control specialists, regulatory compliance managers. By the time we finished our second pitcher, a network was forming around my fledgling company that I couldn't have imagined 24 hours earlier. It's like the universe is saying yes to you, Marlene observed as we walked back to her apartment later that night. Like everything is aligning now that you've stopped trying to fit yourself into your parents' narrow definition of success. It does feel that way, I agreed. Though the practical part of me knows Cortex could still say no, and then I'm back to square one financially. Even if they do, you've gained something more valuable than money, Marlene insisted. You've found your people, your community, the ones who get what you're trying to do and want to help make it happen. She was right. In just a few days, I'd connected with more people who believed in my vision than I had in years of working in isolation at my parents' house. 2 days later, I was installing security cameras at the factory entrance when my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Elena Morgan, I answered, balancing precariously on a stepladder. Ms. Morgan, this is Sarah Chen from Cortex Ventures. Her voice revealed nothing. Do you have a moment to discuss your presentation? I climbed down carefully, heart pounding. Yes, of course. Our team was impressed with both your technology and your vision, she began. Your cardiac monitoring system addresses a genuine need in an innovative way. However, we do have concerns about your manufacturing capabilities and regulatory pathway. My heart sank. This was investor speak for interesting but too risky. That said, Sarah continued, we'd like to propose a structured investment approach. Initial funding of $500,000 for your first production run and clinical trials, with additional tranches available upon meeting specific milestones. I gripped the phone tighter, afraid I'd misheard. You're offering investment? Contingent on due diligence, yes. We believe in your technology, Ms. Morgan. And more importantly, we believe in your ability to execute your vision. The gentleman who asked about your motivation at the end of your presentation was Dr. Edward Liang, former head of cardiology at Westlake Medical Center and one of our medical advisors. Your answers to his questions apparently carried significant weight. We discussed preliminary terms, timeline expectations, and next steps. By the time the call ended, I was sitting on the factory floor, back against the wall, tears streaming down my face. Not just because of the investment, though that was life-changing, but because for the first time in my adult life, my work had been evaluated on its merits alone and found worthy. That evening, as I sat at my makeshift desk reviewing Cortex's preliminary term sheet, my phone buzzed with a text from Cassandra. Mom and Dad are worried. They say you haven't responded to any messages. Can we talk? I hesitated, then texted back. I'm fine. Building my company. We'll be in touch when I have time. Her response came quickly. Company. Elena, be serious. They're trying to help you find a real job. For a moment, I considered ignoring her. Then I typed, I have a real job. CEO of Morgan Medical Technologies. Just secured seed funding from Cortex Ventures. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, wait, seriously? Cortex Ventures, the healthcare VC firm? They invested in you. Yes, official announcement next week. Please respect my space right now. I'll reach out when I'm ready. The 3 dots appeared and vanished several times, but no further messages. Came through? I set my phone aside and returned to the term sheet, a small smile playing at my lips. For the first time in our relationship, I had rendered Cassandra speechless. As darkness fell over the factory, I stood at the window overlooking Riverton's industrial district. Lights glowed in scattered windows, signs of life and work continuing, despite decades of economic hardship. Somewhere out there were people who had spent their careers building medical devices in this very building. People who might now help me bring that legacy back to life. 3 days ago, I had been the family disappointment. the failed daughter who couldn't meet her parents' expectations. Tonight, I was a funded entrepreneur with a mission, a community, and a future limited only by my own determination. I affixed Marlene's brass plaque beside the factory's main entrance, Dr. Elena Morgan, Morgan Medical Technologies. Not seeking approval, not asking permission, simply claiming my space in the world, one bold step at a time. The weeks following Cortex's investment were a whirlwind of activity. With funding secured, everything accelerated at a pace that was both exhilarating and exhausting. I legally established Morgan Medical Technologies as an LLC, opened business banking accounts, and refined the prototype with enhancements that had previously been impossible due to budget constraints. Most significantly, I hired my first employees, Thomas Reeves, the former Merrick mechanical engineer Janet had introduced me to, and Sophia Diaz, a brilliant recent biomedical engineering graduate who'd been working as a barista while applying fruitlessly for positions at larger medical technology firms. They kept telling me I needed more experience, Sophia explained during her interview, which we conducted at a folding table in what was gradually becoming a functional laboratory. But no one wants to be the company that provides that experience. I recognized in her the same hunger, the same need to prove herself that had driven me. I can't match the salary the big firms would offer, I warned her. But you'll get hands-on experience with every aspect of bringing a medical device to market, from design refinement to regulatory strategy. Her eyes lit up. That's worth more than a bigger paycheck at a company where I'd be stuck doing one narrow task. I want to learn the whole process. And so our tiny team formed, me as the inventor and CEO, Thomas bringing decades of manufacturing expertise, and Sophia contributing cutting-edge knowledge from her recent education, all supported by Marlene's evening and weekend assistance with our data infrastructure. The factory itself began a parallel transformation. With Cortex's funding, I hired local contractors to update the electrical systems, install proper security, and convert the office spaces into functional work areas. Many of the contractors I discovered had connections to Merrick's history, a father who'd worked on the assembly line, an uncle who'd managed inventory, a cousin who'd handled shipping and receiving. My dad used to come home with his hands stained blue from the dye they used to mark defective parts, remarked Carlos, the electrician upgrading our circuit breakers. He'd have loved seeing this place coming back to life. These casual connections formed an invisible web of support around our fledgling operation. People worked efficiently, offered suggestions based on their knowledge of the building, and occasionally brought in items they thought might be useful, an old but functional refrigerator, office furniture from a business that was downsizing, even vintage Merrick technical manuals found in attics and garages. 6 weeks after securing funding, we had a functional prototype manufacturing line capable of producing 10 units per week, small scale by industry standards, but perfect for our initial clinical validation studies. The factory floor, once eerily empty, now hummed with purpose. We should document this, Sophia suggested one evening as we calibrated a testing station. The story of bringing medical manufacturing back to Riverton. It could be powerful for marketing, community engagement, maybe even attracting more investment. Good idea, I agreed. But who has time for that? My roommate's a journalism major at Westlake University, she offered. She's looking for an internship project. This could be perfect. She gets professional experience. We get documentation of our journey. That's how Zoe Friedman entered our story. A senior journalism student with a keen eye for narrative and an infectious enthusiasm for what she called the phoenix rising from Riverton's ashes. She began visiting the factory weekly, photographing our progress, interviewing team members, and chronicling the evolution of both the company and the space. This is more than just a business story, she explained as she set up lighting for photographs of Thomas demonstrating a calibration procedure to Sophia. It's about revival, about reclaiming something that was lost. The human angle is what makes it compelling. I hadn't thought about our work in those terms. I'd been focused on the technology, the market potential, the upcoming clinical trials. But Zoe helped me see the broader narrative, how Morgan Medical Technologies wasn't just creating a product, but rebuilding a legacy. Through all of this activity, I'd had minimal contact with my family. Cassandra had attempted several more texts. After learning about Cortex's investment, ranging from congratulatory to concerned to slightly accusatory. That's amazing about Cortex. Why didn't you tell us you were making such progress? Mom keeps asking if you're eating properly. At least, let them know you're okay. Dad says your silence is childish and professionally immature. Just call them, Elena. I responded only occasionally with brief updates, maintaining boundaries that still felt fragile but necessary. My parents made no direct contact, whether out of stubbornness, uncertainty, or respect for my space, I couldn't tell. 8 weeks after leaving my parents' home, I was reviewing regulatory documentation with Thomas when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Elena Morgan, I answered, still scanning the compliance checklist before me. Ms. Morgan, this is Rebecca Santos from Health Tech Quarterly. I understand you're developing an innovative cardiac monitoring system designed for underserved markets. I set down my pen. Health Tech Quarterly was the leading publication in our industry. Being featured there could dramatically accelerate awareness of our technology among potential partners and customers. That's correct, I replied, motioning to Thomas that I needed a moment. May I ask how you heard about our work? Sarah, Chen at Cortex mentioned your company during a panel discussion on emerging healthcare technologies at last week's MedInnovate conference. She was quite enthusiastic about your approach. We're putting together a special issue on accessibility innovations, and your monitoring system sounds like a perfect fit. What followed was a 30-minute interview about our technology, our mission, and our progress toward clinical trials. Rebecca asked thoughtful, technically detailed questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than cursory coverage. One last question, she said as our conversation wound down. What motivated you to focus specifically on technology for underserved communities, rather than pursuing more profitable mainstream markets? I shared my grandfather's story, explained my belief that quality healthcare monitoring shouldn't be a luxury, and outlined how our approach could transform preventative care in resource-limited settings. Fascinating perspective, Rebecca remarked. We'd like to send a photographer to your facility next week, if that's possible. Our readers would appreciate seeing where this innovation is happening. After confirming details for the photographer's visit, I sat in momentary disbelief. From working in isolation in my parents' house to being featured in Health Tech Quarterly in just 2 months, the trajectory felt unreal. Zoe, who'd been photographing our prototype assembly process, approached with obvious curiosity. Good news? You look like you just won something. Health Tech Quarterly wants to feature us in their Accessibility Innovations issue. Her eyes widened. That's major industry publicity. How did they find you? Apparently, Sarah Chen from Cortex mentioned us at a conference. I shook my head, still processing the opportunity. Everything's happening so quickly. Not quickly, Zoe corrected, her journalistic precision showing. You've been developing this technology for years. The recognition is coming quickly, but the work that earned it wasn't overnight success. She was right, of course. The sudden attention felt like a windfall, but it was built on countless hours of solitary work when no one was watching or validating my efforts. The Health Tech Quarterly photographer arrived the following week, a meticulous professional who spent hours capturing images of our team, our technology, and our manufacturing process. He seemed particularly drawn to the contrast between the historic industrial building and the cutting-edge technology we were creating within its walls. This location tells a story all by itself, he observed, photographing our prototype against the backdrop of exposed brick walls that still bore faded Merrick signage. The juxtaposition is compelling. 2 weeks later, the issue was published with our story as the cover feature. Revival in Riverton: How Morgan Medical Technologies is Democratizing Cardiac Care. The article detailed our technology, mission, and unique approach to manufacturing, accompanied by striking images of our team at work in the repurposed factory. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My email inbox filled with inquiries from potential partners, suppliers, healthcare systems interested in clinical trials, and even other investors. Our website, hastily constructed and barely functional, crashed from unexpected traffic. We need to scale up our infrastructure, I told the team during our morning meeting, gesturing to the printed article that now held a place of honor on our conference room wall. Both digital and physical. This exposure is an opportunity we need to be ready for. Thomas nodded sagely. Been thinking about that. The east wing of the building has assembly space we could renovate next. Would triple our production capacity. Sophia, who'd been monitoring our digital analytics, added, "Our website had over 20,000 visitors before it crashed. People are interested in what we're doing. We should consider bringing on someone to manage communications and digital presence." As we discussed next steps, Janet poked her head into the conference room. "Package for you, Elena. Courier just delivered it." The small package bore a Westlake return address, but no name. Inside was a copy of Health Tech Quarterly with our cover story and a handwritten note on heavy stationery. "Elena, I saw this and thought of you. Actually, I think of you often and wonder how you're doing. Congratulations on your success. It seems you found your path after all. Dad." Just his name. Not Love Dad or Sincerely Dad, but still an acknowledgement, a recognition of what I'd accomplished. I stared at the note, unsure how to feel about this tentative olive branch. "Good news?" Thomas asked, noting my expression. "Just a note from my father," I replied, slipping it back into the envelope. He saw the article. Thomas, who'd heard bits and pieces about my family situation over the weeks we'd worked together, nodded understanding. "Must feel good to have your work recognized." "It does," I agreed, though the emotions were more complex than I could articulate. But what feels better is knowing we're on the right track with the technology itself. This publicity is validation, but the real accomplishment will be seeing our monitors in clinics that need them. As the meeting concluded and everyone returned to their tasks, I found myself standing alone in the conference room, looking at the magazine cover featuring our team. From the outside, it probably appeared like overnight success. Young entrepreneur disrupts medical device industry with innovative approach. The reality, of course, was messier and more nuanced. Years of work in obscurity, the painful break with my family, the leap of faith into this abandoned factory, the community that had formed around our mission, contributing in ways both small and significant. I pinned my father's note to my office bulletin board alongside other milestones. Our first successful prototype test, the Cortex investment letter, our initial manufacturing license. Another piece of the journey, neither defining nor diminishing. All that had come before and all that still lay ahead. That evening, as I worked late finalizing protocols for our upcoming clinical validation study, Marlene called. "Have you seen the Westlake Business Journal website?" she asked without preamble. "No, why?" "They've picked up your story from Health Tech Quarterly," she said, with a local angle. "Westlake native brings medical innovation to neighboring Riverton. It's the top trending article." I pulled up the website on my laptop. There was our team, our factory, our story, now framed as a regional economic development narrative. "They're calling you a homegrown innovator," Marlene continued, amusement in her voice. "Your parents' social circle definitely reads the Business Journal." The implication was clear. People who had known me as the Morgan family's underachieving daughter would now see me as a successful entrepreneur making industry headlines. "That shouldn't matter," I said, though something inside me, some small, wounded part that still craved validation, felt a flutter of satisfaction. "It doesn't have to matter to you," Marlene replied wisely. "But it's okay to acknowledge that it feels good to be recognized in your hometown. You're human, Elena. Even revolutionaries like to be appreciated sometimes." I laughed, grateful as always for her perspective. Speaking of appreciation, we need someone to manage our suddenly overwhelming communications. Any chance you know a data scientist who might want to transition to a healthcare technology startup? "Are you offering me a job, Dr. Morgan?" she asked, using the title she knew I rarely claimed despite my PhD. "Competitive salary, equity options, and the chance to help build something meaningful," I confirmed. "Plus, your best friend is the boss." "Well, when you put it that way, let's talk details tomorrow." As we said our goodbyes, I looked around the factory floor, now softly illuminated by security lighting. In just 2 months, this abandoned space had become the heart of something vibrant and purposeful. Our team was growing, our technology was gaining recognition, and our mission was resonating with people who shared our vision for more accessible healthcare. The path forward wouldn't be smooth. We faced regulatory hurdles, manufacturing challenges, and the complex dynamics of bringing disruptive technology to conservative healthcare markets. But for the first time, I wasn't walking that path alone, or under the shadow of others' expectations. I had found my own light, and it was illuminating possibilities I never could have imagined from the confines of my childhood home. The summer heat bore down on Riverton with relentless intensity. Inside the factory, industrial fans fought a losing battle against the rising temperatures, their droning hum providing the soundtrack to our increasingly frenetic workdays. Despite the discomfort, energy pulsed through our growing team as we prepared for a crucial milestone, our first clinical validation study at Riverton Community Health Center. "Final calibration complete on units 1 through 10, Sophia announced, wiping sweat from her brow as she updated our tracking system. "Ready for sterilization and packaging," Thomas nodded approvingly. "Quality control checks are green across the board. These units are performing at 99.2% accuracy compared to the hospital-grade reference monitors." I felt a surge of pride looking at our first production batch, 10 gleaming cardiac monitoring units destined for real-world testing. Each represented thousands of hours of development, refinement, and pure determination. Each carried the potential to transform care for patients in underserved settings. "Dr. Patel's team is expecting delivery tomorrow morning," I confirmed, reviewing our clinical protocol one final time. 2 weeks of parallel monitoring with their current systems, followed by 2 weeks of our system as primary with their equipment as backup. Our small manufacturing team, now expanded to include 2 former Merrick assembly technicians, gathered around the units for a moment of collective appreciation. What had begun as my solitary project had evolved into something larger, something that belonged to all of us. "I never thought I'd see medical devices being built in Riverton again," remarked Gloria, who had worked at Merrick for 27 years before the closure. "My grandson doesn't believe me when I tell him this town used to make products that saved lives all over the world." "He'll believe it now," Thomas said, gently placing the first unit into its custom packaging. "Because we're doing it again." The following morning, I personally delivered our monitoring systems to Riverton Community Health Center. Dr. Patel, the medical director who had agreed to conduct our initial validation, met me at the entrance. Her skepticism was evident in her measured greeting and careful examination of our equipment. "The concept is certainly intriguing," she acknowledged as we walked to the cardiology department. "But I've seen many promising technologies fail in real-world clinical settings. The gap between laboratory performance and practical application can be substantial." "That's precisely why we want to start with your facility," I explained. "You serve a diverse population with varying cardiac conditions, and your resources are more constrained than larger hospitals. If our system works effectively here, That's meaningful validation. Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. Fair enough. Though I should warn you, our patients aren't data points or theoretical use cases. They're real people with complex conditions and limited options. Any technology that adds to their burden rather than reducing it won't last long in my department. Her protective stance toward her patients only increased my respect for her. That's exactly the perspective we need. Our goal isn't just accuracy, it's usability and accessibility. If healthcare workers find it difficult or patients find it uncomfortable, we've failed regardless of how well it functions technically. The implementation went smoothly, with our team providing training to the cardiology staff while technicians integrated our monitoring systems with the center's existing infrastructure. By afternoon, the first patients were being monitored simultaneously with both our technology and the center's standard equipment. As I prepared to leave, Dr. Patel pulled me aside. Your approach is refreshing, Ms. Morgan. Most medtech companies send marketing representatives who can recite specifications but have never actually built the devices themselves. Your hands-on knowledge is evident. Thank you, I replied, surprised by the compliment from someone who had seemed so skeptical hours earlier. This technology has been my focus for nearly 4 years. Sometimes I think I know these circuits better than I know myself. She smiled slightly. Passion and expertise are valuable. But remember, the ultimate measure isn't what you know about the technology, but what the technology does for patients. I look forward to seeing those results. Her words stayed with me during the drive back to the factory. In my determination to prove myself, to my parents, to investors, to the industry, had I maintained proper focus on the actual purpose of our work? The reminder was timely and humbling. Back at the factory, I found an unexpected visitor waiting in our makeshift reception area. Cassandra, impeccably dressed in a designer suit that looked wildly out of place against our industrial backdrop. Elena, she said, rising as I entered. You're a difficult person to pin down these days. I hadn't seen my sister in over 3 months, not since the dinner that had precipitated my departure from our parents' home. The sight of her, so polished, so reminiscent of the family I'd distanced myself from, sent conflicting emotions coursing through me. I've been busy, I replied, gesturing vaguely at the facility around us. Building a company takes time. So I see. Her gaze traveled over the renovated space, the laboratory equipment, the production area visible through interior windows, the whiteboards covered in technical notations. This is not what I expected. What did you expect? Honestly? Something smaller, more theoretical, less. She searched for the word, established. The admission surprised me. Despite her texts following the Cortex investment, I'd assumed Cassandra, like our parents, still viewed my work as a hobby rather than a legitimate enterprise. Why are you here, Cass? I asked, leading her to my office, a Spartan space with utilitarian furniture and walls covered in technical schematics and regulatory documentation. She set her designer handbag on my desk and extracted a folder. Professionally speaking, I'm here because Crestview Pharmaceuticals is exploring partnerships with medical device manufacturers focusing on underserved markets. Your company's recent coverage in Health Tech Quarterly caught our corporate development team's attention. The irony was almost too perfect. My sister, who had benefited from our parents' unwavering support while I struggled alone, was now approaching me as a potential business partner. And personally speaking, I prompted, maintaining a neutral expression. Cassandra's professional veneer cracked slightly. I'm here because you're my sister, and despite what you might think, I care about what happens to you. Mom and Dad are struggling with how things unfolded. You mean they're struggling with not being able to control my choices anymore? She sighed. It's more complicated than that, Elena. They genuinely believed they were helping you by pushing you toward more conventional career paths. They didn't understand what you were building. And you did? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. No, she admitted, surprising me again with her candor. I didn't. I still don't fully understand the technical aspects of what you're doing, but I recognize success when I see it. And what you've accomplished here, she gestured to encompass the factory, is remarkable by any standard. Her words should have felt validating. Instead, they sparked an unexpected flare of anger. Now that industry publications and investors have deemed my work valuable, suddenly it's remarkable by any standard. Where was this recognition when I was working nights and weekends in my bedroom at Mom and Dad's house? Cassandra had the grace to look uncomfortable. That's fair. I didn't see it then because I was looking through the same lens they were. Conventional success, established paths, known quantities. I missed what you were building because it didn't fit the framework I understood. The honesty in her response diffused some of my anger. And now? Now I'm here with two propositions, she said, shifting back toward her professional demeanor. First, Crestview is interested in discussing potential distribution partnerships for your monitoring systems in developing markets where we have established networks. That's what's in this folder, a preliminary overview of what that might look like. I accepted the folder but didn't open it. And the second proposition. Mom and Dad's 30th anniversary is next month. They're having a small dinner at La Maison. She named an upscale restaurant in Westlake where our family had celebrated special occasions throughout our childhood. They'd like you to be there. The invitation caught me off guard. After months of minimal contact, just my father's brief note following the magazine article, this seemed like a significant overture. Did they ask you to invite me, or is this your initiative? I asked, struggling to keep my tone even. They asked, Dad specifically. Cassandra hesitated, then added, He has the health tech article framed in his study. I saw it last week when I was there for Sunday dinner. The image was difficult to reconcile with the father who had dismissed my work as a startup fantasy just months earlier. Why now? Because I've proven commercially viable? Because the business press has validated what they couldn't see themselves? Maybe, Cassandra acknowledged. Or maybe because they miss their daughter and regret how things ended. People can hold contradictory truths, Elena. They can be wrong about your potential and still love you. They can fail to understand your vision and still want you in their lives. Her words struck a chord I wasn't prepared for. Throughout my life, I had equated my parents' lack of faith in my professional capabilities with a lack of love. The possibility that these could be separate issues, that they could have fundamentally misunderstood my work while still caring, for me as their daughter, had never fully registered. I'll think about it, I said finally. The anniversary dinner, I mean. As for the Crestview proposal, we'll review it, but we're currently focused on our clinical validation study. Any distribution discussions would be premature until we have those results. Cassandra nodded, accepting both my professional boundary and my personal ambivalence. Fair enough. The dinner is on the 17th at 7 o'clock. Let me know if you'll attend, and I can handle the details. As she prepared to leave, she paused at the door. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, Elena. What you've built here is extraordinary, regardless of what happens with Crestview or any other potential partner. After she left, I sat at my desk, staring at the Crestview folder without opening. The symmetry was almost too perfect. My sister, the golden child whose corporate success had always overshadowed my unconventional path, now approaching me as a potential business ally. My parents, who had threatened to charge me market rate rent if I didn't abandon my dreams, now seeking reconciliation after those same dreams had proven viable. Part of me wanted to reject both overtures as too little, too late. Another part recognized the potential strategic value of a partnership with a company like Crestview, regardless of the personal complications. And a third, more vulnerable part wondered if family relationships could be salvaged even after such fundamental misunderstandings. I was still contemplating these questions when Marlene knocked on my office door. Team meeting in 5 minutes to review the implementation at Riverton Community Health, she reminded me. Also, 3 more centers have expressed interest in participating in expanded trials once we have preliminary results. I nodded, setting aside the Crestview folder and my conflicted feelings about the family invitation. I'll be right there. The meeting room was crowded with our growing team: engineering, manufacturing, quality control, data analysis, communications. Each person represented a different facet of the complex process of bringing our technology to the patients who needed it most. As I looked around the table at these individuals who had chosen to believe in our mission, I realized that while navigating my complicated family dynamics was important, it wasn't my most pressing priority. What mattered most was honoring the trust these people had placed in me and the commitment we collectively had made to improving healthcare access. Dr. Patel had some valuable insights during today's implementation, I began, bringing the meeting to order. She reminded me that while technical performance is essential, the real measure of our success is the impact on patients and healthcare providers. With that in mind, let's discuss how we can gather the most meaningful feedback during this validation phase. The discussion flowed, with each team member contributing expertise and perspective. This was the community I had built, not through inheritance or advantage, but through shared vision and mutual respect. Whatever decisions I made about reconnecting with my family or considering Crestview's proposal would be made from this position of strength and clarity. As the meeting concluded and team members dispersed to their respective tasks, Thomas lingered behind. The veteran engineer had become something of a mentor to me, his decades of experience providing ballast to my sometimes frenetic energy. "Saw your sister visiting earlier," he remarked casually. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "She came with a business proposal from her company and a dinner invitation from my parents." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Funny how success changes how people see you. Suddenly, you're not the risky investment anymore. You're the valuable connection." "That's exactly it," I agreed, relieved that he understood without lengthy explanation. "Part of me wants to reject both offers on principle." "Understandable," he said. "But consider this. Success gives you the freedom to engage on your terms. 3 months ago, you needed distance to build something of your own. Now you've done that. You can choose to reconnect without losing yourself in the process." His perspective cut through my swirling thoughts with characteristic clarity. This wasn't about forgiving past dismissals or pretending they hadn't hurt. It was about recognizing that I now operated from a position of validated accomplishment rather than desperate proving. "Thank you, Thomas," I said simply. "That helps." He nodded, gathering his notes from the meeting. "For what it's worth, I've found that most people can grow if given the chance. Even parents who think they know everything about their children." That evening, as I locked up the factory, I gazed at the plaque beside the entrance. Dr. Elena Morgan, Morgan Medical Technologies. Each word represented a truth I had claimed, despite others' doubt. Each letter affirmed a journey that had required breaking away from expectations that constrained rather than nurtured. Perhaps it was time to see if my family could acknowledge that journey, not because industry publications or investors had validated it, but because it represented my authentic self and purpose. Perhaps it was time to discover whether reconciliation was possible without surrendering the independence I had fought so hard to establish. I pulled out my phone and texted Cassandra, "I'll attend the anniversary dinner, but I'm bringing Marlene as my guest, and I'll be coming directly from the factory, so don't expect corporate attire." Her response came quickly, "Understood. I'll update the reservation. Thank you, Elena. It will mean a lot to them." As I drove back to my small apartment, I had finally moved out of the factory's office space after the first round of funding. I realized I was approaching this reunion not from a place of seeking approval, but from a position of knowing my own worth. Whatever happened at that dinner couldn't diminish what I had built or who I had become. The real validation hadn't come from Cortex's investment or HealthTech Quarterly's coverage, or even Crestview's interest in partnership. It had come from patients whose lives might be improved by our technology, from employees who believed in our mission enough to join our company, and most importantly, from my own unwavering belief in the value of my vision, a belief that had sustained me when no one else shared it. That was a foundation no family dinner could shake, regardless of the outcome. The data from Riverton Community Health Center arrived exactly 2 weeks after our implementation, packaged in clinical language and statistical analysis that belied its emotional impact. Our monitoring systems had performed at 98%, 7% accuracy compared to equipment costing 20 times as much, with significantly higher ease-of-use ratings from healthcare workers. "This exceeds even our internal benchmarks," Sophia exclaimed, analyzing the reports spread across our conference table. "And look at these user feedback scores. Clinical staff rated our interface simplicity at 9, 2 out of 10. Marlene, who had taken over our data analytics and communications, nodded enthusiastically. The testimonial from that nurse practitioner is particularly powerful. She said our system allowed her to monitor 3 additional patients per shift because of the streamlined workflows. The validation represented everything I had envisioned when designing the system. Not just technical performance, but meaningful improvement in how healthcare workers could deliver care. Each efficiency translated directly to more patients served in settings where resources were already stretched thin. "Dr. Patel has requested a meeting tomorrow," Thomas added, checking his email. "Says she has insights to share that weren't included in the formal report." I felt a momentary flicker of concern. Did she indicate any problems? "Quite the opposite," Thomas reassured me. "Her message mentions unexpected benefits and additional applications they've identified." This was better than we could have hoped for. Initial validation studies typically revealed bugs to fix and refinements to implement. Discussions of expanded applications usually came much later in the development process. "I'll meet with her first thing tomorrow," I confirmed. "In the meantime, let's prepare for Phase 2 implementation at the other centers that expressed interest." As the team dispersed to their various responsibilities, I retreated to my office to finish preparations for another significant event, my parents' anniversary dinner that evening. After 3 months of minimal contact, I would be seeing them in a context laden with both personal history and new professional dynamics. Marlene found me there an hour later, staring absently at production schedules while my thoughts drifted to the upcoming dinner. "Earth to Elena," she said, waving a hand in front of my face. "You've been reviewing the same page for 20 minutes. Want to talk about what's really on your mind?" I sighed, pushing the files aside. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's known you since we survived Thermodynamics 301 together," she replied, dropping into the chair across from me. "You're thinking about tonight." "I'm trying to approach it strategically," I admitted, "like a business negotiation." Marlene laughed softly. "Family dinners aren't business negotiations, no matter how much easier that would make them. There's no term sheet or expected outcome." "That's exactly the problem." I leaned back in my chair, frustrated. "In business, objectives are clear. Tonight, I don't know what success even looks like." "Maybe that's because you're still thinking in their framework," Marlene suggested. "Success or failure, measurable outcomes, defined expectations." "And what framework should I be using instead?" She considered this thoughtfully. "Maybe none. Maybe tonight isn't about achieving something specific, but about being present as your authentic self. The self you've discovered and strengthened these past few months." Her perspective, as usual, cut through my circular thinking. I had been approaching the dinner as another test to pass, another opportunity to prove myself worthy. But I had already proven my worth. To investors, to clinical partners, to the healthcare workers using our technology, and most importantly, to myself. "You're right," I acknowledged. "I don't need to perform tonight. I just need to be present." "Exactly." Marlene stood, checking her watch. "Now, as your official +1 and emotional support human, I suggest we both get ready. La Maison has an excellent wine list that I intend to thoroughly explore while you navigate family dynamics." 3 hours later, we arrived at La Maison, the upscale French restaurant where my family had celebrated special occasions throughout my childhood. I had changed from my usual work attire into a simple but elegant dress, a concession to the venue's formality without abandoning my newly established identity. Cassandra was waiting in the lobby, her expression registering momentary surprise at my appearance. Perhaps she had expected the disheveled engineer she'd visited at the factory. "Elena," she greeted me with a careful hug. "You look lovely, and—" This must be Marlene? Introductions were exchanged with practiced courtesy. As Cassandra led us toward the private dining room reserved for the occasion, she whispered, "They're nervous too, just so you know." The revelation that my parents, who had always seemed so certain in their judgments, might be approaching this reunion with trepidation was oddly comforting. Perhaps we were all navigating unfamiliar territory tonight. My mother spotted us, first as we entered the elegant dining room. She rose immediately, emotion flickering across her normally composed features. "Elena," she said, her voice catching slightly. "You came." "Happy anniversary, Mom," I replied, accepting her embrace with a combination of emotional distance and genuine goodwill. "You remember Marlene?" My father stood more slowly, his expression unreadable. He had aged noticeably in the months since. I'd left home, new lines around his eyes, more gray at his temples. "Elena," he said simply, extending his hand before seemingly thinking better of it, and pulling me into an awkward hug instead. The initial greetings gradually gave way to the familiar rhythms of a family dinner. Wine was poured, appetizers served, pleasantries exchanged. Marlene, bless her, effortlessly filled conversational gaps with anecdotes from our college days that carefully avoided any controversial topics. It wasn't until the main course arrived that my father finally addressed the elephant in the room. "Your mother and I have been following your company's progress," he said, setting down his wine glass with deliberate care. "The clinical trial results appear promising." The formality of his tone almost made me smile, so typical of how he approached uncomfortable conversations, especially those involving admitted errors in judgment. "They are," I confirmed. "Our monitoring systems are performing exceptionally well in real-world healthcare settings." "Elena is being modest," Marlene interjected. "Their technology is outperforming equipment costing 20 times as much while being significantly easier for healthcare workers to use." My mother leaned forward with what appeared to be genuine interest. "How did you overcome the power consumption issues you were struggling with last year? I remember you mentioned battery life being a major obstacle." The question startled me. I hadn't realized she had been paying enough attention to my work to recall specific technical challenges. "We developed a proprietary power management system," I explained, warming to the familiar technical subject. "It dynamically allocates resources based on active monitoring parameters, rather than running all systems continuously." As I elaborated on the solution, I realized my parents were actually listening, not with the polite disinterest of previous years, but with engaged attention. My father asked follow-up questions about manufacturing processes and regulatory pathways. My mother inquired about user interface design and training requirements for clinical staff. "You've been researching medical device development," I observed, finally recognizing the informed nature of their questions. My father glanced at my mother before responding. "We have." After seeing the Health Tech Quarterly article, we realized how little we understood about what you've been building all these years. It seemed Important to educate ourselves. The admission cost him visible effort. Robert Morgan had built his career on being the most knowledgeable person in any room, on having answers rather than asking questions. This acknowledgement of a significant gap in his understanding represented a substantial shift. What we're trying to say, my mother added gently, is that we were wrong, Elena. We evaluated your work through our limited understanding of success, rather than trying to understand your vision on its own terms. And we missed something extraordinary as a result, my father concluded, meeting my gaze directly. I keep your article in my study as a reminder of that failure of imagination on our part. The sincere acknowledgement left me momentarily speechless. I had anticipated many possible scenarios for this dinner: strained politeness, conditional acceptance predicated on my new professional status, perhaps even continued misunderstanding, disguised as reconciliation. I hadn't expected this genuine recognition of their fundamental misperception. Thank you for saying that, I replied eventually. It matters to hear it explicitly. We should have seen it sooner, my mother said, regret evident in her voice. All those years we thought we were protecting you from disappointment by pushing you toward conventional paths. When really, my father added, we were protecting ourselves from the discomfort of not understanding your work. It was easier to dismiss it than to admit we couldn't properly evaluate it. Cassandra, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, throughout this exchange, finally spoke. I was equally guilty. I measured your choices against my own definition of success, without considering that you might be pursuing something entirely different, but equally valuable. The collective acknowledgement from my family was both validating and strangely disorienting. For years, I had defined myself partly in opposition to their disapproval, the underestimated daughter determined to prove her worth. Having them recognize, my path created an unexpected vacuum where that resistance had been. I appreciate everyone's reflections, I said carefully, but I want to be clear about something. I didn't build Morgan Medical Technologies to prove you wrong or to earn your approval. I built it because I believe in creating technology that serves people who have been overlooked by traditional medical device manufacturers. We understand that now, my father replied, which makes what you've accomplished even more impressive. You weren't motivated by external validation or conventional metrics of success. You were driven by a vision that was invisible to us, but crystal clear to you. Marlene caught my eye across the table, a subtle nod communicating her appreciation for how the conversation was unfolding. This wasn't the performance of reconciliation I had feared, but something more genuine, a family renegotiating its relationships based on new understanding. So, where do we go from here? My mother asked as dessert was served. We've missed you, Elena, but we also recognize that you've built a life and a company that are entirely your own. The question was offered without pressure or expectation, an open invitation rather than a demand. 3 months ago, I couldn't have imagined my mother approaching our relationship with such careful respect for my autonomy. I think we start with this, I replied. Honest conversations where we relate as adults with different perspectives rather than as parents and disappointed child. I can't return to the dynamics we had before. My father nodded solemnly. Nor would we want you to. Those dynamics clearly didn't serve any of us well. Perhaps, Cassandra suggested, we could start with something simple. Mom and Dad haven't seen your facility in Riverton. Maybe a tour sometime? A chance to understand your work in its proper context. The suggestion was reasonable, a concrete next step without excessive emotional demands. I could arrange that. I agreed. Though I should warn you, it's a working manufacturing facility, not a corporate headquarters. Prepare for industrial aesthetics and practical footwear. The light laughter that followed eased remaining tension. As we finished our meal, conversation drifted to other topics. My parents' anniversary trip plans, updates on extended family members, Cassandra's recent professional challenges. When the evening concluded, My mother embraced me with unmistakable emotion. "I'm so proud of what you've built, Elena. Not because it's successful by conventional standards, but because it's meaningful and entirely yours." My father's goodbye was more reserved but equally sincere. "Thank you for coming tonight, and for giving us the opportunity to see you more clearly than we have before." Driving home afterward, Marlene waited until we were halfway to Riverton before asking, "So, how are you feeling about all that?" I considered the question carefully, sorting through the complex emotions the evening had evoked. Validated, certainly. Relieved, mostly. But also free, somehow. Like I've been carrying the weight of their disapproval for so long that having it lifted feels almost disorienting. "That makes sense," she observed. "You've spent years defining yourself partly in opposition to their expectations. Having them acknowledge your path means you're solely responsible for defining yourself now." "Exactly," I agreed, watching the lights of Westlake recede in the rearview mirror as we headed toward Riverton. "It's like removing a counterweight I'd grown accustomed to pushing against." "So what happens with the Crestview proposal?" Marlene asked. "Now that family dynamics are shifting, does that change your perspective on potential partnership with Cassandra's company?" "No," I said firmly. "That decision will be made solely on business merits, separate from personal considerations. If Crestview's distribution network aligns with our mission to reach underserved markets, we'll explore collaboration. If not, we'll find other partners." Marlene smiled approvingly. "Healthy boundaries. I like it." As we crossed the bridge connecting affluent Westlake to industrial Riverton, I felt a profound sense of alignment between my personal and professional journeys. Both had required breaking free from externally imposed limitations to discover authentic potential. Both had involved finding the right community of support rather than trying to convert skeptics. And both were still unfolding, with challenges and opportunities I couldn't yet imagine. Tomorrow would bring the meeting with Dr. Patel about unexpected benefits discovered during clinical validation. Next week would bring initial discussions with additional healthcare facilities interested in our technology. The month ahead would include careful evaluation of potential distribution partnerships, including but not limited to Cassandra's proposal from Crestview. Each of these developments represented a step further along the path I had envisioned years ago while working alone in my bedroom, dismissed as unrealistic by those closest to me. The validation from my family, while meaningful on a personal level, was ultimately just one more confirmation of what I had always known about my work's value and potential. The true satisfaction came not from proving others wrong, but from proving myself right, and more importantly, from seeing my technology begin to fulfill its purpose in improving healthcare for those who needed it most. As we pulled up to my apartment building, Marlene gave my hand a quick squeeze. "You know what the best part of tonight was?" she asked. "What?" "Watching you exist fully as yourself, not as the family disappointment, or even as the vindicated success story, but simply as Elena Morgan, brilliant engineer and determined founder who happens to also be someone's daughter and sister." Her observation captured exactly what had felt different about the evening. For the first time in my relationship with my family, I had been present not as a reflection of their expectations or as a reaction against them, but as the person I had become through my own choices and commitments. That, more than any professional achievement or public recognition, represented the true culmination of my journey from shadow to substance, from doubt to determination, from others' limited perception to my own expansive vision. The real headline wasn't that my parents had been wrong or that I had succeeded despite their lack of faith. It was that I had discovered the courage to define success on my own terms, and in doing so, had created something of genuine value not just for myself, but for the world I had always hoped to serve. Dr. Patel's office at Riverton Community Health Center was modest but meticulously organized, reflecting its occupants' precise and practical nature. The morning sunlight filtered through Venetian blinds, casting striped patterns across her desk where patient files and data reports were arranged in neat stacks. "Thank you for meeting on such short notice," she said, gesturing for me to take a seat. I wanted to discuss our findings in person rather than simply adding them to the formal report. "Of course," I replied, curious about what insights had warranted this special meeting. "Your team's feedback has been invaluable." Dr. Patel removed her glasses, a gesture I had come to recognize as her preparation for important discussions. "When we implemented your monitoring systems, we expected to evaluate them purely as alternatives to traditional cardiac monitoring equipment, more affordable, more user-friendly, but essentially serving the same function." I nodded. That had, indeed, been our primary design objective. What we discovered, however, was something unexpected. She opened a patient file, careful to keep identifying information concealed. "This patient, let's call her Mrs. G, came to us with what appeared to be respiratory issues. Standard protocol would have focused our diagnostic efforts accordingly." She pushed the file across the desk, indicating a series of monitoring readings. "Your system's integrated analysis flagged subtle cardiac irregularities that would have been easy to miss on conventional monitors, especially in a busy clinic setting with limited specialist oversight." I studied the data, immediately recognizing the pattern her team had identified. Our algorithms had been designed to detect even minor variations that might indicate underlying issues. As a result, Dr. Patel continued, we conducted additional cardiac testing and discovered a previously undiagnosed condition that was contributing to her symptoms. Had we focused solely on the respiratory presentation, we might have missed the cardiac component entirely. "This is exactly what the system was designed to do," I noted. "Provide more comprehensive monitoring with less specialist interpretation required." "Yes, but here's where it becomes particularly interesting." Dr. Patel leaned forward, her normally reserved demeanor giving way to genuine enthusiasm. "We've now identified 7 similar cases in just 2 weeks, patients who presented with seemingly unrelated symptoms where your system flagged subtle cardiac patterns that changed our diagnostic and treatment approach. The implications were significant. Our monitoring system wasn't just performing as designed. It was expanding the capability of non-specialist healthcare providers to identify conditions that might otherwise require cardiology expertise not readily available in community health settings. I believe your technology has applications beyond what you've initially targeted," Dr. Patel concluded, "particularly in primary care and emergency settings where patients present with complex or ambiguous symptoms. It could serve as a powerful diagnostic assistance tool, not just a monitoring system." My mind raced with possibilities. We had designed the system specifically for cardiac monitoring in resource-constrained environments, but Dr. Patel was suggesting a broader application that could potentially impact an even larger patient population. "We would need to conduct focused studies to validate this application," I said, thinking aloud. "Different protocols, expanded data sets." "Which is precisely why I wanted to discuss this with you directly," Dr. Patel interjected. "Our center would be interested in partnering on a dedicated study exploring this diagnostic assistance capability. We have the patient population and clinical setting that would provide valuable real-world validation." By the time I left Dr. Patel's office an hour later, we had outlined a framework for an expanded clinical study focusing specifically on the system's diagnostic assistance capabilities. What had begun as a follow-up meeting had evolved into a significant new direction for our technology, one that could substantially increase its impact on patient care. Driving back to the factory, I felt an exhilarating sense of possibility. Our technology was not only performing as designed, but revealing potential applications we hadn't initially envisioned. This wasn't just validation, it was evolution. The SAW factory hummed with activity when I arrived. Our team had grown to 17 people now, engineers, technicians, quality specialists, administrative staff, each contributing to the increasingly complex operation of bringing our monitoring systems to market. "How was the meeting with Dr. Patel?" Thomas asked, looking up from the assembly station where he was training two new technicians on calibration procedures. "Illuminating," I replied, unable to contain my excitement. "She's identified an expanded application for our technology, one that could significantly broaden its impact." As I explained Dr. Patel's observations and the proposed new study, I noticed Sophia listening intently from her workstation. "That makes perfect sense," she said when I finished. "Our pattern recognition algorithms were designed to be comprehensive, rather than targeted. They're essentially looking for any deviation from established baselines, not just specific conditions." "Exactly," I confirmed. "What we designed as a monitoring tool may actually function as a diagnostic assistant in settings where specialist expertise is limited." "That could change our entire market positioning," Marlene observed, joining the conversation. "Instead of competing solely in the cardiac monitoring space, we'd be creating a new category: AI-enhanced diagnostic support for non-specialist providers." The implications rippled through our team as each person processed what this might mean for our product development, regulatory approach, and market strategy. What had begun as my solitary vision in a bedroom at my parents' house was now evolving through the collective intelligence and expertise of the community we had built. Later that afternoon, I found myself on an unexpected call with Sarah Chen from Cortex Ventures. What I had anticipated would be a routine investor update turned into a strategic discussion about the expanded applications Dr. Patel had identified. "This is precisely the kind of organic market discovery we hope for in early-stage deployments," Sarah said, her voice carrying the measured enthusiasm of an experienced investor. "The ability to identify broader applications based on real-world implementation is a significant competitive advantage. We'll need to adjust our development roadmap and regulatory strategy," I acknowledged. "Positioning the system as a diagnostic assistance tool requires additional validation and possibly different FDA pathways." "Cortex can help with that," Sarah assured me. "We have several portfolio companies that have successfully navigated similar pivots. I'll connect you with their founders for guidance." By the time the call ended, Sarah had not only offered strategic support, but also hinted at potential follow-on investment to accelerate our expansion into this newly identified market opportunity. As I updated our development roadmap that evening, incorporating the insights from Dr. Patel and the strategic guidance from Sarah, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Your mother and I would like to take you up on that factory tour. Offer. Would Saturday morning work? We promise to wear appropriate footwear." The message carried a hint of self-deprecating humor that was new in our evolving relationship. Since the anniversary dinner 2 weeks earlier, we had exchanged several brief but cordial messages, a tentative rebuilding of communication without the weighted expectations of the past. I replied, "Saturday at 10 would work. The team will be running a test production batch, so you'll see the facility in operation." His response came quickly, "Looking forward to it. Proud of what you're building there." The simple acknowledgement still felt strange, welcome but unfamiliar after years of strained approval contingent on following paths I hadn't chosen. This new dynamic, where my parents were making efforts to understand my world rather than insisting I conform to theirs, represented its own kind of breakthrough. I set my phone aside and returned to the development roadmap, adding notes about the expanded clinical study with Dr. Patel's team. Each line represented not just a technical milestone, but a step toward fulfilling the purpose that had driven me from the beginning, creating technology that served patients who had been overlooked by traditional medical device manufacturers. The next morning I arrived at the factory earlier than usual, drawn by an idea that had formed during the night. If our monitoring system could detect subtle cardiac patterns that informed diagnosis of seemingly unrelated conditions, could we Enhance this capability through focused algorithm development? I found Sophia already there, apparently driven by similar thoughts. She looked up from her computer as I entered, her expression animated with the particular energy that comes from technical inspiration. I've been analyzing the data patterns. From the cases Dr. Patel identified, she said without preamble, there are distinct correlation markers that we could potentially amplify in our next software iteration. I was thinking the same thing, I admitted, pulling up a chair beside her. If we refine the pattern recognition parameters specifically for these diagnostic applications, we lost ourselves in technical exploration, mapping potential algorithm enhancements and testing them against anonymized data Dr. Patel had provided. Hours passed unnoticed as we refined concepts and documented potential improvements. The rest of the team arrived to find us surrounded by diagrams and code snippets, deep in discussion about implementation approaches. Thomas took one look at our absorbed focus and quietly directed the production team to proceed with the day's scheduled activities without interrupting our flow. By mid-afternoon, we had outlined a significant enhancement to our system's capabilities, a dedicated diagnostic assistance module that could be integrated into the existing platform with minimal hardware modifications. The innovation wasn't just incremental, it represented a fundamental expansion of what our technology could offer healthcare providers. This is why I wanted to work here, Sophia said as we finally paused, stretching after hours of intense concentration. At a larger company, this kind of agile response to field insights would take months of committee reviews and approval hierarchies. Her observation highlighted something I had taken for granted: the nimble, responsive culture we had built at Morgan Medical Technologies. Without corporate bureaucracy or established procedures to navigate, we could move directly from insight to innovation, guided by our mission rather than institutional constraints. That evening, as the team gathered for our weekly progress meeting, I shared the expanded vision emerging from Dr. Patel's insights and our technical exploration. The discussion that followed was vibrant with possibilities, challenges, and collaborative problem-solving. We should document this pivot, Zoe suggested, her journalist's instinct for narrative still evident despite having joined our team full-time as communications director. The evolution from monitoring system to diagnostic assistant tool is a compelling story for both industry publications and potential healthcare partners. Agreed, Marlene said, and we should prepare a dedicated presentation for the potential distribution partners we're evaluating. This expanded application substantially increases the value proposition. As the meeting concluded and team members dispersed, I remained in the conference room, looking at the wall where we had posted our company mission statement months earlier. To create accessible medical technology that serves patients overlooked by traditional healthcare systems. The words remained unchanged, but their implementation was evolving in ways I couldn't have anticipated when I wrote them alone in my bedroom at my parents' house. Each step forward revealed new possibilities, new applications, new ways to fulfill the purpose that had sustained me through years of doubt and dismissal. This, I realized, was the truest form of validation, not recognition from family who had once dismissed my vision, not investment from firms that now saw its commercial potential, but evidence that the technology itself was fulfilling its intended purpose and even expanding beyond it. The journey hadn't been linear or predictable. The path had required breaking from expectations, establishing independence, building a community of shared purpose, and remaining open to evolution. But each challenging step had led to this moment of alignment between vision and reality, a moment that justified every doubt overcome and every obstacle navigated. As I gathered my notes and prepared to leave, I paused at the window overlooking the factory floor. The space that had once stood abandoned, a symbol of industrial decline, now pulsed with purposeful activity, people building technology that would improve healthcare for those who needed it most. The transformation wasn't just in the physical space or even in the technology we were creating. It was in the lives being reconnected to meaningful work, in the healthcare providers gaining tools to better serve their patients, and in my own journey from dismissed dreamer to validated founder. Each of these interconnected transformations had begun with a single choice: the decision to believe in my vision even when those closest to me could not see its value. That choice, more than any external validation that followed, had been the pivotal moment that changed everything. Saturday morning arrived with unusual clarity for late autumn in Riverton. The factory windows gleamed in the sunlight as I walked through each section, ensuring everything was prepared for my parents' visit. It wasn't vanity that drove this attention to detail, but a desire for them to see the reality of what we had built. Not a polished facade, but an authentic representation of our daily operations. The test production batch was running smoothly, with 10 units moving through various stages of assembly and quality control. Team members worked with focused precision, each contributing specialized expertise to our increasingly refined manufacturing process. "Nervous?" Thomas asked, joining me as I adjusted a display of our monitoring system's evolution, early prototypes alongside current production models. "Oddly, no," I replied, realizing it was true. 3 months ago, the thought of my parents evaluating my work would have tied my stomach in knots. Today it feels inconsequential to the actual value of what we're doing. Thomas nodded approvingly. "That's how you know you've built something real. External validation becomes a footnote, not the headline." At precisely 10 o'clock, Janet appeared at the main entrance, escorting my parents through the security check-in. My mother wore practical shoes as requested, though her idea of casual still involved a cashmere sweater and designer jeans. My father had embraced the industrial setting more fully, dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt that wouldn't have looked out of place on our production floor. "Elena." My mother greeted me with a warm but still slightly cautious embrace. "Thank you for having us." My father surveyed the factory with open curiosity. "Remarkable transformation. I remember when Merrick closed this facility. Most people thought it would never reopen." "Most people were wrong about a lot of things," I replied lightly, without accusation. "Let me show you what we've built." For the next 2 hours, I guided them through each aspect of our operation: research and development, manufacturing, quality control, shipping, administration. Rather than presenting a sanitized overview, I introduced them to team members who explained their specific contributions to our collective mission. My parents listened with genuine attentiveness, asking thoughtful questions that revealed the research they had done to understand our technology and market positioning. My father, ever the analytical thinker, focused on manufacturing processes and regulatory strategies. My mother, with her background in healthcare administration, showed particular interest in our clinical implementation approach. "Your testing protocols are impressively thorough," she observed as we examined our quality control station. "Most startups cut corners here to accelerate deployment. Patient safety isn't something we're willing to compromise on," I explained. "Our target facilities often lack backup systems or specialist oversight. Our technology needs to be absolutely reliable." At the prototype development area, Sophia was working on the diagnostic assistance module we had outlined earlier that week. I introduced her to my parents, explaining her role in expanding our system's capabilities. "Elena mentioned you're a recent graduate," my mother said. "What attracted you to Morgan Medical Technologies rather than a more established company?" Sophia didn't hesitate. "Established companies put new engineers in narrowly defined roles. Here, I'm involved in everything from algorithm development to clinical implementation. I'm learning more in months than I would in years elsewhere." My father nodded thoughtfully. "And the diagnostic assistance application you're developing now, was that part of the original product plan?" "Not explicitly," Sophia replied. "We discovered it through field implementation. Our monitoring system detected subtle cardiac patterns in patients presenting with seemingly unrelated symptoms, helping clinicians identify underlying conditions that might otherwise have been missed. That's the advantage of designing technology. For real-world application rather than theoretical perfection, I added. Implementation reveals possibilities you couldn't anticipate in a controlled development environment. As we continued the tour, I noticed my parents exchanging glances that contained unspoken communication, a habit from their 30 years together. There was something evaluative in their expressions, but not in the dismissive way I had grown accustomed to throughout my life. This was different, assessment combined with growing comprehension. We concluded in the conference room, where Marlene had arranged coffee and refreshments. The large windows overlooked the production floor, providing a panoramic view of our operation in motion. "This is more comprehensive than we expected," my father admitted, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "The integration of research, development, and manufacturing under one roof is unusual in today's medtech landscape. It gives us unparalleled responsiveness," I explained. "When we identify an improvement opportunity, we can implement it immediately, without navigating corporate bureaucracy or offshore manufacturing delays." "And your investors support this approach?" my mother asked. "Most venture capital firms prefer asset-light models with outsourced production." The question revealed more research than I had given them credit for. Sarah Chen at Cortex understands our vision. She sees the strategic advantage of controlling our manufacturing process, especially for technology-serving markets where reliability and serviceability are crucial. My father set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Elena, your mother and I owe you an apology that goes beyond what we expressed at dinner." The directness of his statement caught me off guard. Robert Morgan was not a man given to emotional declarations, particularly admissions of error. "We didn't just fail to see the potential in your work," he continued. "We actively discouraged you from pursuing it, making your journey significantly more difficult than it needed to be." My mother nodded in agreement. While Cassandra received our unquestioning support, financial, emotional, practical, you faced skepticism at every turn. Yet you've built something here that is, quite frankly, extraordinary. "Not just the technology," my father added, gesturing toward the factory floor below, "but this community, this purpose. You've revitalized a facility that many considered permanently lost and created opportunities for people whose skills had been discarded." Their recognition, specific and substantive rather than generalized praise, affected me more deeply than I had anticipated. It wasn't about receiving validation I no longer needed, but about being truly seen after years of invisibility within my own family. "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. "It means something to hear it explicitly." "We've been thinking a great deal about why we failed to support your vision," my mother said. "Beyond our limited understanding of your field, I believe there was something more fundamental at work." My father nodded, continuing the thought as they often did. "We equated conventional achievement with security. Cassandra's corporate career path felt safe, predictable, measurable. Your entrepreneurial ambitions seemed inherently risky, especially in a field we didn't understand. We mistook our discomfort with uncertainty for wisdom about your future," my mother concluded. "In trying to protect you from what we perceived as inevitable disappointment, we became the primary source of that disappointment ourselves." The insight demonstrated a level of self-reflection I hadn't expected from my parents, who had always presented themselves as certain in their judgments and secure in their worldview. "What changed your perspective?" I asked, genuinely curious about their evolution. They exchanged another glance before my father answered. "Several things converged. The Health Tech Quarterly article forced us to confront the gap between our perception of your work and its actual significance. Cassandra's observations after visiting your facility challenged our assumptions further. But most importantly," my mother added, "we've spent time educating ourselves about what you're building. We've researched medical device development, studied the markets you're targeting, even joined online forums for healthcare innovation. You've been researching my field? The image of my parents hunched over computer screens, learning about medical technology development, was both surprising and oddly touching. Extensively, my father confirmed with a hint of pride. Your mother has become quite knowledgeable about regulatory pathways for innovative medical devices. I've developed a particular interest in manufacturing processes for precision healthcare technology. Their commitment to understanding my world, even belatedly, represented a form of respect I had never received from them before. Not approval, based on external validation or commercial success, but genuine engagement with the substance of my work. That means a great deal, I acknowledged. More than accolades or investment or industry recognition. The fact that you've taken the time to actually understand what I'm building, rather than evaluating it through preconceived notions of success. My father cleared his throat, visibly moving into less comfortable emotional territory. We hope it might be possible to establish a new relationship moving forward, not as the parents who failed to support your vision, but as interested parties who recognize the significance of what you've created. We don't expect to simply erase the past, my mother added quickly. The damage we caused through years of dismissing your work and comparing you unfavorably to Cassandra can't be undone with a few conversations or belated recognition. But perhaps, my father suggested, we might build something new. A relationship based on mutual respect rather than authority and expectation. Their proposal was offered without pressure or emotional manipulation, a genuine invitation rather than a demand. The restraint itself demonstrated how much they had grown in their understanding of healthy boundaries. I'd like that, I said after a moment of reflection, though it will take time to establish new patterns after so many years of difficult dynamics. We understand, my mother assured me. We're prepared to do the work required to earn back your trust, however long that might take. As our conversation continued, Thomas appeared at the conference room door with an apologetic expression. Sorry to interrupt, but the representatives from Central Valley Health Network have arrived for their tour and product demonstration. They're a bit early. Central Valley Health Network operated 15 community clinics across rural areas 2 hours east of Riverton. They represented exactly the type of healthcare provider our technology was designed to serve. Facilities with limited resources serving populations with significant medical needs. I need to handle this, I explained to my parents standing. Would you like to observe the demonstration? It might provide additional context for what we discussed earlier. They accepted immediately, their interest appearing genuine rather than obligatory. As we walked to the demonstration area, my father asked questions about Central Valley's specific needs and constraints, while my mother inquired about their patient demographics and clinical capabilities. The demonstration proceeded with remarkable smoothness. Our team presented both the established monitoring capabilities and the emerging diagnostic assistance applications, using actual case studies from Dr. Patel's implementation to illustrate real-world impact. The Central Valley representatives, their medical director, technology officer, and chief financial officer, asked probing questions that revealed both their genuine need for our technology and their concerns about implementation challenges in resource-constrained environments. Rather than glossing over difficulties, our team addressed them directly, outlining our support protocols, training resources, and remote assistance capabilities. This transparent approach visibly reassured the Central Valley team more than any polished sales presentation could have. You've clearly designed this system with our realities in mind, their medical director commented as the demonstration concluded. Most medical technology feels created for ideal conditions that don't exist in rural healthcare. That's precisely the gap we're addressing, I confirmed. Technology that works in the real world, not just in perfectly resourced urban medical centers. As we concluded arrangements for a pilot implementation at 2 of their facilities, I noticed my parents observing the interaction with evident interest. Their expressions held something I rarely associated with them in relation to my work: respect, perhaps even pride, without the conditions or reservations of the past. After the Central Valley team departed, my parents prepared to leave as well. The visit had extended well beyond the planned tour into substantive discussion and unexpected demonstration. "Thank you for allowing us to witness your work in its, actual context," my mother said as we walked toward the exit. "It's given us a much clearer understanding of what you've been building all these years." My father nodded in agreement. "What stands out most is the purposefulness of everything here. Each aspect of your operation directly serves your core mission in tangible ways." Their observations were specific and insightful, reflecting genuine engagement rather than perfunctory praise. "We won't take more of your time," my mother added, noting my team waiting with questions about the Central Valley implementation. "But perhaps we might have dinner again soon? Your choice of restaurant, of course." I found myself nodding with genuine willingness rather than obligation. "I'd like that. My schedule is hectic with these new implementations, but I'll check with Marlene about openings next week." As they departed, Thomas joined me by the entrance. "So that's the famous Morgan family," he observed. "They seem different from what I expected based on your history." "They are different," I acknowledged. "Or perhaps they're showing aspects that were always there, but got buried under fear and fixed expectations." "And how are you feeling about that?" he asked with his characteristic directness. I considered the question carefully. Cautiously optimistic. They're making genuine efforts to understand my world rather than expecting me to conform to theirs. That's significant progress. Thomas nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes people need concrete evidence before they can expand their understanding. They couldn't see the value in what you were building until it existed in a form they could recognize. Which is exactly why I had to leave and build it on my own terms, I concluded. Some visions have to be realized before they can be fully comprehended by others. As we turned back toward the factory floor, where our team was already preparing for Monday's production cycle, I felt a deepening appreciation for the journey that had brought me here. The painful break from my family, the risk of establishing independence with limited resources, the challenge of building something without external validation, all had been necessary steps toward creating something authentic and meaningful. The true measure of success wasn't headlines or investment, or even family recognition, though each held value in its proper context. It was the alignment between vision and reality, between purpose and impact, between the future I had imagined, alone in my bedroom, and the present unfolding around me in this once-abandoned factory now humming with renewed purpose. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.